Morning, everyone, or it may be afternoon for some of you as well. But I wanted to welcome you to our garage webinar today. It's called Learn the Secrets to Writing Garage Insurance. My name is Anae Agostini. I'm CEO of CID Insurance Programs, and we're lucky today to have Lisa Daniel, who's the Vice President of Garage Underwriting at Century. And we also have Teresa Cochran, who's our garage underwriter here at CID Insurance Programs. I want to also introduce Jacob Cole, who's our marketing coordinator. He works behind the scenes and makes things run smoothly. So let's get started.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Daniel. Welcome. Today we're going to learn a little bit of information about garage insurance. So the first slide, I'm going to pass back to Anne for just a moment, which is just going to be our logistics slide, and I'd like her to cover that information with you quickly.
Perfect. And this is the easy part. Most of you know the logistics with webinars. You're going to be muted, but you'll be able to hear. But your voice is important to us, so please pose those questions in the chat room on the right-hand side of your screen at any time throughout the webinar, and we'll make sure that Lisa or Teresa takes the time to answer your questions as we go along. The objectives for today are going to be, garage is a more complicated type of risk to understand. There's lots of different coverages. So we're going to go over the garage application, which can be your guide for helping a client understand garage. You're going to learn about those important coverages that are unique to the garage form. And in addition, we're going to give you some help with trying to identify the coverage that would be needed for each type of garage risk that you may come across. So without further ado, Lisa, I'll let you take it from here.
Outstanding. Thank you, Anne. Good morning, everyone. Just a little bit of a quick background here with reference to garage exposures. Oftentimes we find that agents are nervous about writing this particular coverage or that they're nervous about writing wheels-based coverage. So the focus of our initial conversation here is explaining to you what a garage policy is all about and the type of information that we're looking for. Typical with most insurance policies, we want to know if the applicant has had prior coverage. It's not just a matter of prior insurance or prior losses. It's a matter of both of those pieces of information are necessary for Teresa to properly underwrite your account. We're going to go through some pages of the application as kind of our guidebook for today's conversation. The application is a fabulous tool. It leads you right down the appropriate path for questions and answers with your customers, as well as helps you provide information to Teresa to properly underwrite your account for you, as well as to properly price and make suggestions to aid and assist both you and the insured. So that first part about prior coverage is super critical. Next, we're going to talk about how your vehicles are stored. I want you to think of the autos on a garage policy in a similar fashion that you would think about contents coverage or inland marine coverage. You're all very familiar with property insurance, and on every property application, we're going to ask you, right, what type of building do you have? I want you to think that same kind of thought with reference to the cars. We want to know, are they in a building? Is this a pole barn or is this a fully enclosed structure? We want to know if it's not a building, is it behind a fenced location or is it in an open parking lot? Sometimes people will get confused with terminology. When we say a open parking lot, I want you to think of every grocery store that you've ever pulled up to. It's not behind a fence. You can just wander right on up and you could touch any other vehicles that are in that giant parking lot, or think of a mall parking lot. That is considered to be an open parking lot where there's no theft barrier for anyone to come and touch the vehicle. So there's your concept behind an open parking lot. And then we also want to know, with reference to our exposure, what type of autos are we talking about? Is the insured selling cars, or is he repairing cars? Or is he storing cars? Or is it a valet operation where he's temporarily parking cars? And then what kind of cars are we talking about? Are these private passenger vehicles? Are these truck tractors? Is it maybe farm and agricultural equipment? Anything that runs along the land that is a motorized unit could be considered a quote-unquote auto. So by definition, a riding lawnmower is a land motorized vehicle. That would be considered technically an auto. So I want you to think of all of those various autos that the insured is touching, whether it's selling it or repairing it. And we've got a space on the application where we actually ask you, does he have this? Does he have that? And we go through line by line by line, trying to aid you, the agent, in pulling that information from the insured so we can properly document the exposures. Typical to all insurance companies, we want to understand what the known exposures are for the insured so that we can properly document, yes, our intention of coverage was to cover those exposures. So that's why that application is such a fabulous tool, is it provides you a lot of spaces to say, do we have this? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So you don't have to try to think of all of the possible questions out there in the universe. You can follow along with the application, and it's going to be a fabulous guide for you. Additional to what types of cars we're working with, we want to talk about who's driving those cars. Is it the owners? Is it employees? Do I have a third-party contractor who's operating the vehicles? Am I going to auction on a Tuesday and I'm going to buy 5 cars, but I only have 2 employees, so I'm going to grab 3 friends to go to the auction with me to drive those cars back? Those friends need to be listed and disclosed. So anyone who's going to be operating a vehicle needs to be disclosed, even if it's not a regular quote-unquote employee, right? Even if this person is just a helper for a day or a helper for a few hours, we want all that information so we can properly underwrite your account and properly document the intention for coverage for those drivers. The first section of the application that we're going to look at here is the insurance history. Oftentimes, Teresa and myself at the carrier, we will see someone write the word none across this entire section, and it becomes a guessing game. Does none mean none to the prior insurance, or does none mean none to any prior losses? So you'll notice on this application, there's a little checkbox at the top where it says insurance history. There's a little checkbox there. It says no prior insurance. If they haven't had prior coverage in the past 3 years, check that box. If they had coverage for 1 or 2 out of the last 3 years, you're going to utilize those specific line items to document when he had coverage and when he didn't. And then the same thing for the loss history. If they've had no prior claims, you would check box that no prior losses box, indicating he has not had a loss at any time. Carriers are looking for 3-year loss history. So if he had a claim 10 years ago, you don't need to document that. You need to go ahead and document what occurred within the past 3 years. For the vast majority of policies, 3 years loss history is sufficient. We don't need to go 5 years deep or 10 years deep unless we're talking about a pretty significantly large insured. On this next slide, we're going to talk about the auto storage. Remember how I said we've got that building, we've got the open parking lot, we've got a fenced location. Insurance company pricing structure varies based off of how those vehicles are protected. If you don't fill this in, Teresa's left to guess. Her guess is going to be that they did no protective measures and the price point's going to be slightly higher, as opposed to if you say, Teresa, they have a fenced and gated location, right? Then their price point just came down because they are taking active measures to protect those vehicles from theft or vandalism. If it's a building, we want to know how old the building is and what's the construction of the building. Does it have a central station alarm? I can tell you many times at the carrier level, I'll receive a submission where it's indicating to me that we've got $3 million in owned vehicles inside of a structure. My immediate thought as a carrier is, that's fabulous. I love that they're in a building. Now I got to ask questions about the building, right? Do we have a central station alarm? Is the building sprinklered? Or if this thing catches fire, are all these cars now locked inside this great big firebox? So I want you to think through those exposures, typical and traditional in your mind for tangible property, and think of the auto like that tangible property. Carriers are going to want that same detail level of information. And then we're also going to want to know, are the vehicles ever stored somewhere else? Are they only at the insured's premises, or does the insured maybe have a, quote, overflow parking lot? If he, is a repair shop, Monday through Friday, most people are working. He might have 10, 15 cars in his care, but come Saturday, those cars are racked and stacked and he's got 20 jobs to get done. He may utilize an adjacent parking lot. We want to know about that parking lot and we want to document it on our policy so that we say, yes, there is an intention of coverage when his vehicles are in that adjacent parking lot. So it's all about disclosing the exposures so we can properly document our intention of coverage. The next slide we're going to look at here is the percentage of operations. And what we're looking for in this section is really information about the types of autos. So imagine the difference in an accident scenario. I have two private passenger vehicles that have a rear end accident, okay? We know that that can actually get pretty bad, pretty scary, pretty violent. Imagine now if I have a truck tractor or a heavy truck versus a private passenger auto. It's not going to matter whether the heavy truck rear-ended the private passenger auto or if the private passenger auto rear-ended the heavy truck. The weight and the structure of that heavy truck is such that in the private passenger versus heavy truck war, the heavy truck's going to win. We need to know if the insured has that size of a vehicle. We also need to know if the insured is working with motorcycles, right? If he's working with motorcycles, that's fine. It's an absolute normal exposure. We just need to know that that exposure exists. Or is he working on fire trucks and ambulances, right? You would want to fill in that percentage in that emergency vehicle section on the left-hand column. Your goal and focus here is to get the percentage of operations to total to 100%. So we have complete disclosure. You will notice the very bottom line across this section is other. If we haven't addressed it in any of these listed categories, that's when you'll utilize that other category to indicate what does this guy have, right? I think one of the most interesting ones I had is the guy actually had a tank, right? Technically, a tank is a land motor vehicle. It was part of his inventory. He had it on display, had no real intention of selling it, but he did have this particular vehicle. So we just listed it in the other section, disclosed that, yes, we know this exposure exists. Okay, so very simple collection of data gathering here where we try really hard to give you 99% of the various types of autos that you're going to be exposed to, and then we provide you that other line for those random one-offs that'll come about. The next section here is about the employees. Understanding who is operating the vehicles is critical for underwriting. So every person who is involved in this business, whether they're driving the vehicles or not driving the vehicles, gets listed. Every driver of the vehicles, whether they're a designated employee or a volunteer helper, right, they're going to get documented and listed. This is one of your best pages as an agent because it gives you the opportunity to collect all that information without forgetting to get names, driver's license, date of birth. You're going to need to provide motor vehicle reports to Teresa, so this page is your best friend in gathering that information. We're going to focus our discussion now a little bit towards auto dealers. Like I said before, it's about disclosure and collection of information. So we want to understand what type of dealership do we have? A typical retail dealership where I walk up and say I want to drive the red car, or is it a wholesale dealership where I have one dealer who's buying vehicles and selling them to other dealers? We want to understand how many vehicles are sold per year because it gives us an idea of the scope of operations for this insured. Are we selling 5 cars a year as a mom and pop exposure, or are we selling through 2,500 units per year as a very large commercial exposure? We also want to know about the transporter plates, and we've got a slide that's going to give us some very specific details. So I'll focus our conversation when we hit that slide. Here's where you would have the Q&A section for, is this a importer, an exporter? Is it retail sales? Is it wholesale? How many cars are sold? The application does a fabulous job in leading you through these questions. I promise you, if you go through the application questions with your insured from beginning to end, it will cut down on the question loop that we may need to go back and say, hey, this section was blank. I need to know the operations. So filling the information out is always to your benefit. When we talk about those plates and we want to know how many plates they have and what are their plates utilized for, there's two different types of plates. There is a dealer plate, which is used by a dealership to transport vehicles that aren't technically registered, right? They're titled to the dealership, but they're not registered. So they don't have a designated license plate on the back of the car that's connected to that VIN number. This is more of a plate that can go on any vehicle in his inventory. So we want to know how many plates they have. And then there's also transporter plates or registration plates. Those are plates that are utilized to move non-owned vehicles. So if you imagine a paint and body shop, they only do paint and body work. They don't do mechanical work. And so we've got the paint and body shop did the paint and body work on it. They now need to transport that vehicle back to the mechanical repair shop to do the mechanical repairs. They can't operate the vehicle on the road without a license plate attached to it. So they have this transporter plate, which is going to be not registered to any particular VIN. It's just registered to our paint and body shop to utilize to transport those cars between various businesses. When it comes to auto service repair operations, what we really want to understand is what does the insured do? So is he an oil and lube shop? Is he a tire shop? Is he transmission focused? We want to understand what the insured's operations are. And then we also want to know if the insured is a repair shop where he's restoring it to factory design, or if he's a modification shop where he's going to put on a lift kit or put on a roll bar or do some sort of modification to the original factory design. We ask about mobile operations. We want to understand, does the insured have a designated described address that you can provide to us where all of his operations are conducted at that address? Or is the insured mobile in nature? So oftentimes when we think of mobile operations, you're going to think of roadside repair services. You might think of windshield companies, right? They'll come to your office or to your house or meet you at the movie theater so they can go ahead and replace your windshield. They also have stationary locations. So it's a matter of disclosing, does he have a main address and he's mobile, or is he strictly mobile? So we know, right, we're not going to find cars at this address. There's no need to go to that address and look for them. They will not be there. We also want to understand if the insured offers pickup and delivery service, right? How much of the time is our insured moving cars back and forth across the road? So if you think of a dealership exposure, they may buy the vehicles at auction, bring them back to their dealership location, and that car sits in a parking lot 99% of its life. 1% of the time it's going to go out on a test drive, someone's going to fall in love with that auto, and off it goes and it's sold. So we need to understand how much of that driving exposure, right? We'll ask you on the application, what's the distance of that driving exposure? We also want to know if there's an uninstalled auto parts or sales exposure. This one sometimes trips agents up. So I want to give you a really classic example of where we have this uninstalled auto parts or other operations. If you think of a car wash, a full service car wash, right? You drop your car off at the front, they're going to take your vehicle and you're going to go inside. And once inside the building, you might pick up a birthday card, you could pick up some fuzzy dice, maybe a soda, a slice of pizza. That business isn't just in the business of selling cars or business of washing cars. They also have auto parts that are selling. They've got potentially a deli or a bakery, right, or a convenience store exposure. So we want to list those exposures so that Teresa can properly document it on the policy that, yes, we're aware of this convenience store or this auto parts store exposure, and we can provide you coverage for it. You don't need an alternate policy. We'll wrap it right up within the garage policy. The next here is the percentage of non-dealer operations, and this is where we're focused on the type of repair work that the insured is doing. Is he doing an alignment? Is he doing oil and lube? Is he doing tires? Is it engine work? This page of the application leads you through those questions very, very nicely. You'll see here we've highlighted a couple of focus points for you. For auto restoration, there's a ground up or a not ground up, right? So you check box that yes, no, and then fill in the percentage of operations. On the lift kits, we ask what's the max inches that the insured will provide on a lift. So this does a really good job of leading you through those questions. The next is a non-dealer kind of Q&A section, and this is where we're doing a little more digging to figure out what the insured's operations are. A lot of this is premises focused. So if you look at this, right, the nature of the business, is it on-site or is it mobile? Do we allow a customer into the repair bay, right? If it's yes, clearly that customer should be accompanied by a mechanic or some member, right? We shouldn't have customers just wandering into the repair bays of our facility. Again, we ask about the pickup and delivery, and then we ask, are there any other sales exposures, right? That's where we're talking about our car wash with his, birthday card sales and fuzzy dice sales. The next page here, we're going to talk about the general operations for garage. So when we talk about garage, oftentimes what we will see is an agent will say, I need a garage keepers policy and a general liability policy. And that's simply a matter of not necessarily grasping that the two are already interconnected within one coverage form. So the garage liability policy provides you auto liability, so the movement of autos, right? We're driving either owned autos or we're driving non-owned autos up and down the road, as well as the general liability. General liability, that's going to be your products, your work performed, your completed operations, slip and fall on premises, right? We've got all of that wrapped up into one policy. So you don't need a separate GL coverage form. Additionally, the garage keepers coverage, oftentimes it seems there's bad vocabulary. We talk about garage keepers liability. It's garage keepers coverage. If you can envision in your mind air quotes around the word keepers, this will keep this locked in your mind as the insured is keeping somebody else's automobile. It's the care, custody, control coverage. The dealer's physical damage coverage, the word dealers is your key indicator word there. This is the dealer's inventory. If you submit an application to Teresa and it's a car wash and you tell her you want $200,000 in dealer's physical damage coverage, she's going to come back and question you and saying, is it a car wash? Because you've asked for coverage for owned autos. Do they actually sell cars? Oh no, I filled it out on the wrong line. It's the quote-unquote keeping of non-owned autos. That should be keepers coverage. And then we're also going to go through a couple of additional coverage options for you. Again, the application is going to provide you space to fill out the limits of coverage. So you can fill out your liability limit of coverage. You're going to answer questions about the radius. If you'd like to buy some additional dealer's E&O coverages. And then we go into that garage keepers, right? Again, air quotes, we're keeping the non-owned autos. The question that we see here that gets left blank quite frequently is on the right-hand side where it indicates the max limit per vehicle. What we're looking for there is the highest valued dollar that is in the insured's care. Is he got a Ford or is it a Maserati? We need to know what type of valuation. In that limits of coverage section for garage keepers, it can be difficult for the insured, and this is where your expertise as an agent comes in to partner with him in determining on an average day how many customers' vehicles does the insured have in his care. What's the average value of those vehicles, right? So if the average is 10 cars and the average is $10,000 per car, simple math, 10 times 10, right? If he says, but wait, on occasion, I will actually work on these high dollar cars and it's $50,000 per vehicle. Okay, well, we may not want to give this guy a $100,000 coverage limit if he's got a vehicle in his care that's worth $50,000, right? That's taking up 50% of his coverage limit. So you may want to offer a little bit higher coverage for that particular insured. Next is the dealer's physical damage section. Again, this is your dealer's inventory coverage, right? That keyword here is the dealer's. And we have that same situation where we're looking for the location value and then the highest single auto value. Here you've got a little build out where it says the value per auto, what's the average number, what's the max number, what's the average value, what's the max value. It'll help you kind of build a box to figure out what that number should be. But it's actually very easy for you to simply tell the insured, please pull up your inventory list or print off a copy of your inventory list. He's got a document. It could be a web-based profile or it could be just an Excel document that shows this is the value of the entire fleet of inventory that he has available to him, right? That's the answer we're looking for. What is that number? What is your invested value? Keeping in mind that location limit, that is the insured's invested value. So his acquisition cost plus any repair cost, that's the number we're looking for there. We don't need his quote unquote list price, right? He bought it for 12, he put $1,000 in repairs into it, but he's listing it for 15. I wouldn't list it as 15,000 for the coverage limit. I would list it as 13,000. It's the value that he's put into that vehicle. On this next slide, you've got an option here for additional coverages. California, you've got uninsured motorist coverage. So you would answer here, what limit of uninsured motorist coverage do I want? Or if you want broadened coverage or hired auto, you've got those spaces available to you to say, yes, Teresa, I want these coverages. The next slide is a really important one that will save you, the agent, from going round and round and round. If there's one thing I can impress upon you is answer the questions on the application and have a quick conversation with your insured. Once the carrier binds coverage, we're likely to send a third-party inspector out to the insured's premises to take a look at it. We want to make sure the premises is safe. We want to make sure that we have a decent understanding of his operations. So having a conversation with your insured that an inspector is going to come out, encouraging them to go ahead and do a little cleanup and maintenance around the premises, right? Pick up any trash in the parking lot, fill in those potholes, trim back the shrubbery that's touching the sides of the structure, go through your building, right? Make sure that your smoke extinguisher or your fire extinguishers are mounted, right? They don't need to be on the floor because then they get moved to a shelf or they get put behind a cabinet or behind a box and nobody knows where they're at when the fire starts. They need to be mounted to a wall and their expiration tags need to be current. Make sure he has smoke detectors. Make sure they're in working order. Does he have non-smoking signs? Make sure that if we're dealing with a repair shop of any sort, that they have a self-closing metal garbage can, right? You can think of it, you can pick it up at, any home improvement store, Happier grocery stores. Some people with large dogs like myself have them in our kitchens, right? You put your foot on the pedal at the bottom, the lid lifts, you put your garbage in, you take your foot off the pedal, it automatically closes. We require those from an insurance standpoint simply because those rags in an automotive repair shop are going to be covered in gasoline, oil, potentially brake fluid cleaner, right? These are all flammables. So when we put them all together and then we leave them in an open cardboard box, once the fire starts, it's escaping the cardboard box. If we put them inside a metal garbage can with a self-closing lid, we've cut off the oxygen source and we've contained the fire. That's one of the classic things that inspection companies are going to look for when they come out. They're also going to look for a metal cabinet. Does the insured have these chemicals stored away and safe? So in the event that there was a fire, that they were not going to be exposed to the entire premises. The next is the requirements to bind coverage. Teresa would really appreciate it if when you send her that fabulous email that says, Teresa, please bind the policy, that you clue her in as to what the effective date is of that binder. Please don't make her guess. We'd also like to receive all of your signed documents. This is to your advantage to provide all of this information up front. It avoids the paper chase later on. So collecting that signed application, getting those loss runs, the uninsured motorist form, and all of those motor vehicle reports, put all of that together in a package and then send that package to Teresa for binding. She'll have everything she needs to wrap it up and get a nice little policy out to you. And with that, I'm going to see if we've got any questions. I don't believe we do, so I'm going to go ahead and pop to the next slide and give you a little bit of a takeaway here. With reference to garage, we've talked today about garage exposures, so understanding what are we insuring, right? What types of cars, what are we doing with those cars? Are we selling them? Are we repairing them? Is it a valet? Is it a car wash? The application walks you through the coverages and kind of gives you a Q&A of, yes, I want this coverage. What kind of limit do I need? Talking with the insured will help you to properly identify the limits of coverage that are necessary, and just utilizing that application as a tool. It is really there for your benefit, and it will keep you moving in the right direction and avoid a loop of questions that could come back later on. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ann.
Thank you, Lisa. Great job, great information. Really, really appreciate your time today. And I also want to thank you all for joining us today. Teresa Cochran is going to be your garage underwriter, so feel free to send your applications in for her to quote. You can find them on our website, or I believe that Jacob will be sending you out an application with his follow-up email. And so you can find that way. You can also reach out to Teresa directly. Her information is on the screen and is on our website. And make sure you visit our website, because we've got all kinds of broker tools that will help you do a better job at writing garage insurance. So there is a question, Lisa. How fast to get, or Teresa, how fast to get a quote once we submit an application?
Well, if everything is complete, and honestly, it depends on what's going on at my desk. I strive, 2 to 3 business days, but again, it depends on what's going on at my desk.
Okay. We're pretty timely with our quotes, so that you could always count on, because Teresa's pretty efficient. Any other questions? If not, you can send them over even afterward, and we will get answers for you once we receive them. Otherwise,
there's one more question, Anne.
Oh, there is. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Someone asked if we have an appetite to insure new body shops with no previous insurance.
Teresa, yes. You can take that one, or I can, but I think we'd both be agreeable to that exposure.
Absolutely, yes. We can write new venture dealerships, not a problem.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.